A large, ominous mansion is shown at night during a violent thunderstorm. Heavy rain and dark clouds set a tense, horror-like mood, with text questioning what is happening inside this cursed house. Inside the mansion, a long dining table is shown in an elegant dining room. Several family members are seated on both sides, eating in silence under a chandelier. The atmosphere feels stiff and uncomfortable despite the luxurious setting. A close-up shows a fork tapping against a plate with a sharp clink. One person at the table stands up, addresses the head of the table as father, confirming the family hierarchy, and politely asks, "May I have a word with you?" The young man stands with one hand over his chest, speaking calmly but firmly. He politely begins, as he directly asks to be banished from this house. His resolve is clear. The father leans on his hand, staring coldly at him and asking what he just said, clearly caught off guard and displeased. The young man stands firmly in front of the table, facing forward with a calm but serious expression, showing he isn't backing down from what he just said. A different relative leans back in his chair and laughs loudly, treating the situation as ridiculous and mocking the protagonist's request. A relaxed-looking family member mocks him, asking if he's half asleep. He reminds him that their family is a highly renowned noble house with royal blood ties, implying that leaving is absurd. The protagonist internally agrees with what's being said, acknowledging the situation. He thinks to himself that despite the family's status, he knows for a fact that this house is destined to fall into ruin in the near future. Then a fantasy world setting is shown, introducing the popular game called Saint Quest. The protagonist states that everything in this world follows the same rules and setting as that game, so it's basically identical to the game he used to play non-stop. He then reveals that he has been reincarnated as Yuri Loveself, the character who later becomes the final boss of the game. A scene from the game is shown, explaining that this character pretends to be a loyal ally to the protagonist but eventually betrays them near the end. It's emphasized that this character is one of the most hated characters in the game because of that betrayal. This confirms that the protagonist currently has time to act before the main story starts, giving him a chance to change his fate. A timeline explains that Yuri's betrayal happens 1 year after the game's ending, while the main story of the game will officially begin 5 years from now. It's clearly stated that the family's secret plans are fully revealed to the public after the main events. The Loveself family is exposed as conspirators trying to overthrow the country, sealing their downfall. The entire family is branded as criminals and executed, except for the youngest sister. The protagonist points out that even his brother, who is currently mocking him, will later meet a miserable end. Marco smugly claims that staying under the family's protection guarantees wealth and a stable life, showing how blind he is to the future. The brother is identified as Marco Loveself, the second son. A scene from the game shows a desperate family member begging for mercy, highlighting how cruel and poorly handled the ending is. Then a female figure at the table quietly says she thinks it's fine. The protagonist explains that even his sister, who is currently insulting him, will later meet a terrible fate. She openly mocks him, calling him useless and a liability. She is introduced as Miranda Loveself, the eldest daughter. A scene from the game shows someone dying in a humiliating, pitiful way, begging for mercy. The narration emphasizes how pathetic and ironic the death is. A graphic scene shows Yuri's final moment in the game timeline, where he sacrifices his own life to kill Emilina, the saint, confirming that Yuri dies at the end despite being the final boss. The narration explains that Yuri's miserable death in the game was so bleak that players started calling it a gloomy game. Back in the present, someone calls Yuri's name, reacting to his statement, causing a brief moment of surprise at the table. The father stands up, looming over the table with a cold, intimidating presence. He calmly but sharply asks Yuri to explain his reasoning, clearly asserting his authority. Miranda and Marco looks tense and uneasy, realizing the situation is becoming serious. Yuri introduces his father by name, Balin Loveself, the head of the Loveself family, emphasizing his power and status. He explains that despite being the king's younger brother, the father personally handles dirty work like planned assassinations, showing how dangerous he really is. The narration explains that the Yuri's father is an extremely cruel man who will later become the mastermind behind an attempt to overthrow the country. Yuri thinks carefully, realizing that even though he is his son, opposing him directly would be dangerous. He knows he must choose his words carefully or he'll be in serious trouble. Yuri begins to speak, hesitating slightly, and reply, "I want to know what outside world is like for future reference, and using that experience, I can further strengthen the family's power and prosperity," presenting himself as justified and capable. His father's eye shows his cold scrutiny as he repeats the idea of contributing, clearly doubting Yuri and judging him harshly. The rest of the family watching quietly, including the youngest sister, as the tension at the table grows heavier. A heavy step shows the father moving closer. The father's presence feels overwhelming and menacing as he repeats Yuri's words, questioning whether someone like him could truly contribute.
The contrast in size and darkness emphasizes the power gap between them.
The father's twisted with anger and contempt, showing that Yuri's words have pushed him past patience.
Yuri, shocked, realizes the situation turns dangerous.
Another family member, the eldest son, not Love-South, thinks that Yuri is finished, believing there's no way he can recover from provoking their father. As the father slowly reaches out his hand, the father extends his hand toward Yuri with a cold expression, saying he never expected Yuri to say something like this. His words sound calm, but the gesture feels threatening rather than reassuring. Yuri realized that he may have completely misjudged the situation and pushed things too far. A grim flashback shows the father brutally killing a subordinate who talked back to him before, implying that Yuri might suffer the same fate. Yuri watches the hand coming closer, tense and unsure of what the father is about to do.
The father's hand lands on Yuri's shoulder with a soft tap. The father looks down at Yuri and calmly praises his resolve, calling it admirable. His expression is stern but no longer openly hostile. Yuri's eyes widen in shock as his father suddenly changes tone and says he will share some of his land with him. Yuri clearly didn't expect this outcome. The father lays out his condition: Yuri must learn how to become a proper, full-fledged lord, turning this into a test rather than a punishment. Yuri politely thanks his father, keeping his composure despite how overwhelming the situation still feels. Yuri reacts internally, thinking that such an imposing response is exactly what he'd expect from the leader of an evil family, showing both fear and reluctant acceptance. The youngest sister watches silently, sweating slightly, unsure how to react to the sudden shift in authority and tension at the table. After the dinner confrontation, a voice calls out "Big brother."
Yuri turns to her in surprise and recognizes her, calmly calling her by name, Sasha, and acknowledging her presence. A young girl appears, looking anxious and emotional. She says she's worried, clearly distressed by the idea of her brother leaving on his own at such a young age. The narration introduces her as Sasha Love-South, the second daughter. Yuri reflects that she is the only truly kind-hearted member of his entire family, highlighting her innocence and warmth in contrast to the rest. Yuri reflects that Sasha feels like a breath of fresh air, in a house filled with strained and toxic relationships. Sasha tells him that this is a decision he's made on his own, and that she doesn't need to stop him, accepting his decision while standing firm.
Sasha gently offers Yuri a small protective charm, asking him to take it with him. Her expression is soft and worried, showing sincere concern.
A close-up of a weapon being held suggests the harsh reality and danger tied to the Love-South family, contrasting sharply with Sasha's innocence and kindness. Despite her kindness, Yuri reminds himself that she is still part of the same corrupt family, tempering his emotions with caution. Later that night, signaling a shift to a private conversation after dinner, wine is poured into a glass as another voice comments that this decision was made in bad taste. A subordinate speaks to Lord Balin, urging him to reconsider giving land to Yuri, warning that letting Yuri manage territory carries too many risks. Lord Balin tastes the wine and bluntly says it tastes bad, a metaphor reflecting his dissatisfaction. He adds that wine is no different from people, reinforcing his cold, utilitarian view of others. As he pours out the wine, Balin remarks that not every high-quality wine tastes good, implying that things and people can disappoint despite their pedigree. Balin thinks to himself that he originally planned to get rid of Yuri eventually, but he didn't expect Yuri to choose to leave on his own. Balin concludes that if Yuri manages to survive on the land he's been given, there are many ways the family can later use him to their advantage. The document officially appoints him as the Lord of the Village of Elf, confirming his new responsibility. Yuri looks at an official document and wonders what he should do next, realizing his future now depends on this decision. He stands in the village while reading the document, surrounded by simple stalls and goods. Yuri reacts with visible surprise and unease, realizing just how unexpected this assignment is. He explains that the village of Alf is a barren region where crops barely grow and natural resources are scarce.
Because the land has little value, invaders don't bother attacking it, making it strategically unimportant.
Yuri realizes that to develop Alf, he'll need to find capable people first and build the village's infrastructure entirely from scratch, showing the scale of the challenge ahead. He thinks that most skilled and talented people nearby are already working under his father, meaning he can't rely on existing help.
Yuri walks through town while thinking about his father.
He knows his father wouldn't keep all his subordinates close and is likely setting things up behind the scenes.
He pauses mid-step, telling himself to stop as he thinks things through, realizing he's being watched and influenced even now.
Yuri clicks his tongue in annoyance, then sighs, accepting that he doesn't really have a choice but to move forward carefully.
He then arrives at a building marked as a slave shop. Someone recognizes him as Lord Yuri. Inside the slave shop, the owner speaks politely to Yuri, saying that Yuri's father has always treated him well, showing familiarity and respect. Yuri explains that slaves are always bound by a magical contract. Once it's in effect, they cannot disobey or go against their master.
He thinks to himself that at least using slaves bound by magic means he won't have to worry about betrayal, revealing his pragmatic but uneasy mindset. Yuri acknowledges that while the practice is lawful, it isn't something he can call respectable. The slave dealer then points out available slaves, suggesting them as workers to help Yuri develop his land, emphasizing that the system is legal. 3 slaves are shown chained together by their collars, 2 women and a muscular man standing silently with their heads lowered. The word battered emphasizes their harsh treatment and condition. Yuri watches with a serious, unreadable expression, silently evaluating them and the situation rather than reacting emotionally. The slave dealer gestures toward them while explaining that these slaves were carefully selected, presenting them as quality merchandise. The slave dealer smiles smugly and asks Yuri what he thinks, internally mocking him and assuming the third son wouldn't be able to tell quality anyway. Yuri sighs and thinks that the dealer is definitely looking down on him, but he chooses not to argue.
He turns his head and calmly says he'll have to assess the slaves himself, not reacting to the dealer's attitude.
It's further explained that in the game's Sane Quest, players are given various abilities. He explains that Yuri Loveself, the character he reincarnated as, possess special abilities.
The narration explains that Yuri's ability is not ordinary, it's described as exceptionally special.
A close-up of Yuri's eye shows it activating, glowing with a targeting-like pattern as his power turns on. The ability is revealed by name, Appraising Eye. Yuri then looks at the 3 slaves lined up in front of him.
Appraising Eye.
The narration explains what the Appraising Eye does. It allows the user to directly view and evaluate the status of anyone it's used on. He's surprised he can use a skill that didn't even exist in the original game. Yuri reflects that this ability is perfect for him and decides he'll make full use of it. He activates the skill, and glowing symbols and numbers appear, showing the slave's hidden stats.
Yuri narrows his eyes, sensing something odd among the information he's seeing.
Looking closely at the female slave, Yuri realizes something is wrong. She's already under a contract, which shouldn't be the case.
Yuri's Appraising Eye reveals shocking information. The contractor tied to the slaves is Balan Loveself, his own father. He quickly checks again and panics when he sees it's not just one slave, all of them are already under contract. Yuri is stunned.
He realizes Balan must have anticipated him coming here and deliberately made contracts with the slaves in advance. He gives up on the idea of obtaining loyal slaves here, realizing that anyone already contracted to Balan can't be trusted. Yuri gulps, recognizing this as exactly the kind of move he'd expect from the head of a scheming family. The slave dealer starts to speak, offering to arrange something if Yuri has someone in mind.
Yuri thinks to himself that this confirms the man is involved too.
Yuri suddenly slams his hand on the counter and firmly says "excuse me," cutting the dealer off. He calmly says he couldn't find anyone who fits what he's looking for and decides to leave to check somewhere else.
The dealer freezes, visibly shaken, unsure why Yuri reacted like that. The dealer panics internally, wondering if Yuri figured everything out.
Walking outside, Yuri thinks to himself that the situation is bad. He's starting to lose hope of finding anyone who isn't already under his father's influence.
Yuri suddenly stops, realizing he may have acted too quickly.
His expression tightens as doubt hits him. He reflects that if he makes even one wrong move here, the hero's party will have very little chance of opposing his father later on. A grim image flashes through his mind, bodies sprawled on the ground, reminding him of the game's bad endings. He realizes he could be heading straight toward ruin, just like in the original story, if he isn't careful. He shakes his head, visibly stressed and annoyed by how impossible the situation feels.
Yuri thinks to himself that he probably can't find anyone suitable. He's clearly running out of options.
He continues thinking, wondering where he could possibly find someone with zero ties to both his father and the hero's party. As he mutters to himself while moving through the street, nearby people look at him strangely, thinking he sounds crazy. Suddenly, Yuri freezes and shouts internally. He realizes there actually is someone who fits his conditions.
The page introduces the girl's name, Phi.
Phi is identified as a beastfolk girl who was enslaved after being driven from her homeland, following the death of her mother. It explains that Phi became an orphan and had no way to survive in a place where beastfolk are hated. It shows violence and brutality against her. After that, a grim scene shows the hero discovering Phi's corpse, confirming that her fate in the original story is tragic and unavoidable unless something changes. The story explains Phi's role in the original game. Her death leads the hero to question the nation's corrupt practices. She is a character meant to die for a sub-event.
Yuri reflects that this is one of the dark elements of this game.
Yuri grins to himself, realizing this is the perfect chance to recruit someone rare, someone with no ties to either the hero's party or his own family. Yuri rubs the back of his neck, thinking that before anything else, he needs to find where Phi is right now. He overhears people talking nearby, complaining that beastfolk are being hunted again. This immediately catches his attention. His eye sharpens with concern as the words hunting down beastfolk sink in, realizing Fi may already be in danger. A close-up shows Yuri starting to worry, silently thinking, "Don't tell me. Fi is being dragged through the street by men." She struggles and shouts for them to let her go. Fi desperately raises her bound hands, trying to resist or strike back despite being restrained, showing she hasn't given up yet even though she's overpowered. A close-up of Fi's face shows her panicking and gasping for breath, sweat and fear clear in her expression. One of the men grabs Fi's face and restrains her while commenting that too bad she's a beastfolk. Another man remarks that she has a pretty face, showing their crude and objectifying attitude. The men argue briefly. One dismisses the idea of being interested in her, calling beastfolk filthy and subhuman, saying only depraved people would want someone like her. Fi is still held down, unable to escape. Then a close-up of Fi biting one of the man's hand. Then the man lashes out and kicks Fi hard while shouting insults at her for being a beastfolk, knocking her off balance. Fi is slammed to the ground. The man pins her down and continues abusing her, accusing her of being filthy and carrying diseases. The man dragging her says they should just sell her off and be done with it, treating her suffering like a minor inconvenience rather than a crime. Fi weakly tries to speak through the pain, barely managing a broken plea as she's pulled by the hair. Then a pair of boots steps into view, and someone calmly says, "Oh, there you are." Yuri steps forward into the open street and calmly addresses the situation, asking the beastfolk girl by name, "You're Fi, aren't you?" One of the men reacts angrily and demands to know who Yuri is, clearly irritated by his sudden appearance. A close-up of Fi shows her looking shaken and anxious. Yuri smiles calmly and thinks to himself that things are finally going his way, realizing he's found the person he was looking for right away. Yuri continues speaking casually, unfazed by the hostility, reinforcing how confident and relaxed he is. The men glare at Yuri, sizing him up and growing more suspicious and tense. From a distance, Yuri stands facing them, while one of the men starts to recognize him. They then revealed, he's the third son of the Lufsouth family. Yuri stands calmly with one hand on his hip, completely unfazed. The men who recognize Yuri mock him, saying he's famous for being a complete failure in his noble family. The men then starts to form a plan, pausing briefly as they considers the situation, and suddenly rush forward, shouting that they can kidnap Yuri and blackmail his family for a huge ransom, believing they've hit a jackpot by catching him. The narration explains that he survives by concealing his powers and deceiving those around him. Yuri thinks to himself that he should intimidate the attackers by using one of his hidden abilities. The page reveals the name of the skill he uses to hide himself, stealth. The two men charge forward aggressively, threatening to beat him into submission if he doesn't behave. Yuri activates his skill. Using his stealth skill, Yuri suddenly slips past the attacker's perception. He moves in a blur between them as both men swing their weapons, missing him completely. Yuri calmly grips their weapons, his expression focused and composed. The attackers spiked and mace then dropped to the ground. The men laugh greedily, talking about getting rich, completely unaware that Yuri has already slipped out of their grasp. Suddenly, they panic when Yuri's figure vanishes right in front of them, leaving only an outline where he stood moments ago. The attackers freak out, shouting in confusion. One realizes his weapon is gone, while both struggle to understand what just happened. Yuri suddenly appears behind both attackers at the same time, emerging from the shadows. He calmly restrains them and presses a blade to their necks, shocking them completely. The two men freeze in fear, realizing too late that Yuri used his stealth ability to slip behind them. The two attackers panic, realizing they're completely overpowered and caught at a vital spot. Yuri stays calm and focused, thinking about how difficult this stealth skill was to deal with during the game's final boss fight. The men beg for their lives, shocked that Yuri isn't the weak failure they thought he was. Yuri speaks calmly, saying he doesn't mind killing them, but only if necessary, making the threat feel very real. Yuri gives a final warning: they are never to touch that girl again, ending the confrontation with absolute authority. The two attackers panic and flee in terror, screaming as they run away down the street. Yuri glances back with a calm, slightly annoyed look, clearly unbothered now that the danger is over. Fi bows slightly and thanks Yuri sincerely for saving her, still nervous but clearly relieved. She looks shaken and emotional, admitting that thinking about what might have happened to her if Yuri hadn't intervened makes her shudder. Yuri watches her quietly, thinking to himself that she doesn't seem like a bad person. Yuri activates his special ability, Appraising Eye, focusing intently as his eye glows. He decides he needs to confirm Fi's situation for himself. Fi stands frozen in place, startled and confused as Yuri looks directly at her with the skill active. The appraisal result appears, revealing that Fi has no contractor at all. This confirms she's completely free. Yuri smiles to himself, satisfied. He confirms that she has no connections to either the hero's party or his father, exactly as he suspected.
Fi looks confused and nervous, not understanding what he's about to say.
Yuri suddenly grabs Fi's arm to stop her as she reflexively responds in surprise, startled by his sudden action. With a serious but controlled expression, Yuri tells Fi that, as thanks for saving her, he wants to ask her for a small favor. Yuri tells her he's been looking for people like her. Confused and nervous, Fi repeats his words, wondering what he means by people like me. Fi panics and jumps to the worst conclusion, accusing Yuri of being some kind of pervert who's into beastfolk, while Yuri looks genuinely confused by her reaction. Yuri bluntly says he only wants her for one thing, which immediately makes the situation sound suspicious. Yuri finally clarifies his intention by grabbing her shoulder and explaining that what he actually wants is to get her cleaned up, and asks her to work for him as his maid, revealing his true intention clearly. She freezes in shock, completely caught off guard by the unexpected request, unsure how to react as the moment hangs in the air. The scene pulls back to a panoramic view of the city as Fi hesitantly repeats Yuri's proposal, still trying to process it. Yuri responds clearly, confirming she understands. Yes, he really means becoming his maid. Yuri reflects internally, declaring that recruiting Fi is his very first step toward becoming a lord. Fi is having her hair dried and groomed. She looks tense and embarrassed, clearly not used to being cared for like this. Other maids are adjusting her clothes and whispering among themselves while helping her get dressed properly. Fi stands stiffly, overwhelmed by the attention. She opens her eyes in confusion, not fully understanding what's happening. Yuri enters and casually asks how things are going. Fi stands in a well-furnished room wrapped in a cloth while Yuri and a maid wait. Fi is confused and asks what's going on, while Yuri explains they're cleaning her up and taking measurements for a maid uniform. Yuri calmly declares that from now on, she will be his personal maid, stating it as a matter of fact rather than a question. The other maids whisper among themselves, commenting that Yuri is known for caring about beastfolk, while Yuri reacts with mild annoyance at being talked about. Fi hesitates, nervously saying but, as she struggles to process what's happening. Fi looks overwhelmed and emotional, realizing how important and kind the Love-South family seems. She thinks that many people would do anything to work for them. Close-up of Yuri's face as she explains, you can hire any normal people, why choose a clumsy beastfolk like herself? Yuri lifts a teacup and remarks that it's pretty simple, showing how casually confident he is about his decision. Yuri sits calmly at a table in a dim room, saying that the only person who meets his expectations is Fi. The atmosphere feels serious and deliberate. Close-up of Yuri's eye as he admits that his father, Balin Love-South, is an extremely suspicious man, hinting at internal family tension and why Yuri needs someone he can truly trust. A dark silhouette represents Yuri's father, looming and ominous. The narration explains that Yuri's father has secretly placed subordinates all over town to monitor Yuri's every move. Yuri explains his logic. Since Fi was originally supposed to die in an unrelated event, there's almost no chance she could be one of his father's spies. Yuri smiles while drinking tea, thinking that Fi is exactly the kind of person he has been searching for. He feels confident and satisfied with his choice. Fi looks up at Yuri and asks what he wants from her, clearly confused. She wonders why anyone would ever need her, revealing her own emotional distance and detachment. Flashbacks show Fi being insulted and abused, called disgusting, useless, and worthless. These memories highlight how badly she has always been treated. A close-up of Fi crying and apologizing repeatedly. She emphasizes that no one has ever stood up for her before, not even once. Fi lowers her head and hesitantly asks Yuri if he truly needs her, calling him Master Yuri. Her posture shows insecurity and fear of being unwanted. Yuri firmly says he already told her the answer. A maid approaches Yuri and announces that the preparations are complete. Fi stands off to the side, still wrapped in cloth, waiting anxiously. Yuri calmly tells Fi that this will be her first task. Fi looks startled when Yuri addresses her directly, sensing something important is coming. A maid uniform is displayed clearly, sparkling. Yuri calmly tells Fi to go change into her uniform. Fi's eyes widening with excitement and disbelief, showing how overwhelmed she is by what's happening. 10 minutes later, Fi nervously returns. She apologizes for making Yuri wait, clearly anxious about doing things right. Fi stands shyly in her completed maid uniform, hands clasped in front of her. The outfit sparkles visually, emphasizing how different and refined she looks compared to before. She appears nervous but hopeful. Close-up of Yuri's face as he asks Fi how it is and whether she likes it, sounding straightforward and genuinely curious. Fi smiles brightly and answers enthusiastically, saying it's super cute. Her expression is open and happy, showing genuine excitement. Fi suddenly hugs Yuri tightly and thanks him repeatedly. Yuri looks surprised by the sudden affection. Fi hugs Yuri from behind, smiling softly, and lets out a small nervous laugh. While Yuri asks what's wrong, she looks a little shy and hesitant, thinking to herself, A dark, symbolic image appears as Fi recalls rumors she's heard about beastfolk lovers and the horrible things some people do to beastfolk. She rests her cheek against Yuri's shoulder and admits that, despite what she's heard, she feels Master Yuri is different from those people. Meanwhile, Yuri reacts with confusion, clearly not understanding what she is doing. Yuri turns away confidently and says that now that you're dressed, it's time to finish what we started. Fi looks confused and slightly nervous, asking what exactly they're supposed to get done. He then smirks. The framing and expression make his intentions feel serious and a bit ominous. Yuri explains that what they're about to do is something he can't openly tell others about. Then the setting shifts to a rundown area labeled the slums. Yuri leads Fi into a dimly lit bedroom. The atmosphere is tense and quiet, with the bed and candle immediately drawing attention. Fi follows a step behind, unsure and alert. Fi crosses her arms tightly and looks around with wide eyes, clearly nervous and confused by what she's seeing. Her body language shows discomfort and fear as she tries to understand why they've come here. Yuri thinks to himself that this place is so remote his father likely doesn't know about it. At the same time, Fi reacts with a loud shock, clearly startled by what she's realizing. Fi, still shaken, processes everything and reassures herself that Yuri is actually like those horrible beastfolk lovers. Then someone steps forward aggressively, demanding to know who's there as they emerge from the shadows. Two rough-looking kids suddenly appear, shouting and claiming this place as their territory, revealing they've been watching. Yuri calmly realizes and explains internally that homeless kids use this location as their base. Yuri calmly asks the boys to leave, explaining that he and Fi need privacy to discuss something important. One of the homeless boys points at Yuri and bluntly accuses him of being a noble, immediately suspicious of his presence. The younger boy urges his brother to leave, while the older one bristles and complains about being ordered around. The younger boy steps forward and apologizes earnestly. He explains that his brother hasn't eaten in 2 days, so he has been on the edge. Then Yuri begins to warn them. Yuri stands calmly but coldly, declaring that if the boys won't leave, he'll get rid of them no matter what it takes. His expression is emotionless, making the threat feel serious. Fi's face shows deep conflict and she thinks not only does he abuse beastfolks, he even treats orphans as if they are nothing. One of the boys angrily points back at Yuri and challenges him, telling him to try it if he dares. The boys shout defiantly, insulting Yuri and insisting they won't lose to a pampered noble, clearly trying to bluff their courage. 10 minutes later, Yuri calmly holds out skewers of freshly cooked meat, telling the boys he bought them from the butcher and offering to let them eat their fill if they leave him and Fi alone. One of the boys lights up with excitement, happily accepting the offer, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden kindness and food. Fi turns toward Yuri in surprise, confused and unsure, realizing he's actually giving food to the kids who were just threatening him. Yuri casually asks the boys to keep watch while they eat, thinking that way he won't have to worry about anyone else showing up. Fi panics internally, realizing she misunderstood Yuri's intentions. Suddenly, she realizes he's blocking her escape route and worries she needs to run immediately. He suddenly grabs Fi's wrist, stopping her before she can move away. Yuri firmly holds onto Fi and calmly asks where she thinks she's going. Yuri speaks calmly, telling Fi to relax and reassuring her that he'll make this quick. Fi freezes in fear with her hands raised, panicking internally and assuming Yuri is about to do something forceful to her. Fi looks up at Yuri with wide, trembling eyes, calling him Master Yuri, clearly terrified and completely misunderstanding his intentions. Inside her head, Fi spirals further, worrying that Yuri wants to do lewd or inappropriate things to her. The narration reflects Fi's fear, implying she believes something bad is about to happen if this continues. Fi's fear-filled imagination runs wild. She pictures Yuri forcing himself on her, her face twisted in panic and distress. Reality sets in, she is pinned down on the wall with Yuri leaning over her, and she realizes she can't run away anymore, sealing her sense of helplessness. Fi forces herself to think, deciding that if this is really happening, she has to accept it rather than resist. Fi, still completely misunderstanding the situation, blushes heavily and nervously asks him to please be gentle, bracing herself for something she thinks is inevitable. Yuri rubs his eye and calmly tells Fi not to worry, assuring her that he won't hurt her at all. A close-up of Yuri's eye activates his special ability, Appraisal Eye, showing he's about to examine her stats. Yuri's appraisal results appear over Fi, listing her basic information, stats, skills, and magic. It shows she's a beastfolk made apprentice with very low overall stats, but some agility and a dagger skill. Yuri concludes internally that, just as he expected, Fi's overall stats are quite low, confirming she's weak but potentially useful in specific ways. Yuri mutters to himself while thinking, surprised that Fi has agility and a dagger skill, noting she'd be well suited for an assassin role, though he hopes she never turns against him. Fi stands awkwardly and confused, not understanding what's happening or why Yuri suddenly went quiet. Yuri calmly announces that they're finished, treating the whole thing as already over.
Fi blurts out in shock and asks, "We haven't actually done anything lewd at all." Yuri looks confused, and repeats her words with confusion. Fi freezes with wide eyes, completely flustered, as Yuri asks her what on earth she was imagining this entire time. Fi explodes in embarrassment, shouting at him for being an idiot, while Yuri reacts with an awkward, startled response. The scene shifts to a weapon shop outside the city. Yuri asks if Fi realized that he assessed her latent abilities. Fi points out that if that's the case, he could have just done it at home instead. Yuri explains that using his appraisal ability inside the mansion would be reckless, since it's his hidden trump card and even his father doesn't know about it. Fi bluntly asks if Yuri and his father are on bad terms, cutting straight to the heart of the issue. Yuri admits, somewhat vaguely, that the situation is complicated. Fi looks uneasy, sensing there's more going on between Yuri and his father than she knows. Yuri examines a dagger on display and casually says it looks pretty good, clearly evaluating it seriously. Fi reacts with surprise as Yuri directly addresses her and hands her the dagger to look at. He turns to Fi and explains that when he appraised her abilities earlier, he noticed she had a dagger-related skill. Yuri responds calmly, saying that most people usually have 1 or 2 skills, treating it as something completely normal. She blurts out in disbelief that she has skills at all, clearly never having thought of herself that way before. Fi smiles shyly while tearing up a little, saying she was always called useless, but realizing she does have a redeeming quality after all. A close-up of Yuri's eye shows him paying close attention, taking her words seriously. She enthusiastically tells Yuri to watch her, calling him Master Yuri, raising the dagger proudly as she prepares to show what she can do. Fi excitedly swings the dagger in practice, slashing the air with more confidence than before, while Yuri watches and remarks that it's impressive. Fi walks happily through the street, clutching the dagger to her chest and smiling brightly, saying she'll treasure it forever. Yuri follows behind her, quietly observing her excitement. Yuri looks on with a serious expression and bluntly remarks that a dagger is just a disposable tool, contrasting sharply with how much emotional value Fi has already attached to it. Then, one of the street kids calls out to them, acting completely friendly and innocent. Yuri recognizes the kid, calling him the brat from earlier, while the kid calmly fires back, saying Yuri himself is a kid though. The street kid approaches Yuri and Fi and says someone has been looking for him, adding that he thought Yuri should know. Yuri is clearly surprised. Yuri notices something and mutters, "Get a load of this," sensing trouble. He asks who it is. The kid dramatically announces who it is, Lady Emilina the Saint. He looks proud and smug as he reveals the name. Fi looks confused and quietly repeats the name she hears, unsure what it means. Yuri reacts with shock, clearly recognizing the name and understanding how serious this is. A brief narration explains who Emilina is. She's affiliated with the church, uses powerful holy magic, and later joins the heroes party. Yuri looks tense and uneasy, realizing something is seriously wrong. A visualized thought shows Emilina attacking him. Yuri thinks that, in the end, she's a dangerous person who will eventually kill him. The note clarifies this is only an imagined scenario. Trying to play it off, Yuri raises a hand and awkwardly suggests that maybe the kid misheard the name, downplaying the situation. Yuri firmly tells the kid that it's impossible, denying the claim outright, even though his expression shows he's deeply shaken. Yuri mutters to himself, confused and anxious. He doesn't understand why events are unfolding this way and notes that this meeting shouldn't have happened yet. Yuri internally admits the truth to himself, this situation is really bad. Silhouetted figures represent Yuri's fear of the future. He thinks that if he meets Emilina or the other hero members and the story continues as it originally did, his life will completely fall apart. Close up on Yuri as he clenches his fist and focuses. He decides that to avoid the worst possible outcome, he must stay away from the main character of the original game at all costs. Yuri keeps muttering to himself, spiraling into worry. He thinks that if the heroes party ever recruits him, that alone would guarantee his downfall. The kid notices and complains that Yuri's mumbling is creepy. Yuri turns sharply toward Fi, startled, as she calls him Master Yuri. Fi cheerfully says she'd expect nothing less from him and admits she doesn't fully understand his worries, but she's happy that someone as important as Saint is paying attention to him. He suddenly calls out to Fi, snapping out of his anxious thoughts. Yuri's expression hardens with urgency and fear. He grabs Fi and decisively says they're leaving immediately. Fi reacts in shock, completely confused by his sudden command. A wide view of the city establishes the setting, showing a large, bustling town with towers and churches. A crowd gathers excitedly in the street, cheering loudly as Emilina arrives. People shout that the Lady Saint is here, emphasizing how adored and celebrated she is by the public. A nun-like woman walks calmly, thinking to herself that Lady Emilina is as popular as ever, and reflects that with Emilina's charm and looks, that level of popularity is only natural. A full-body view of Emilina shows her elegant outfit and staff as she walks forward gracefully, sparkling effects reinforcing her image as the revered saint.
A close-up of Emelina's face highlights her calm, radiant expression and saintly presence, emphasizing her importance. From the crowd, someone nervously calls out to her, asking if they can shake her hand, showing how admired and idolized she is. A close-up of her eye shows her attention shifting. Her feet step forward deliberately, possibly toward the person who caught her attention.
Emilina looks a bit unsure but politely asks if this is okay. That person then thanks her. Another person in crowd excitedly asks Lady Saint Emilina to look their way.
She turns her head slightly, asking if she's doing it correctly.
Another request comes in asking her to wink. Emilina does so earnestly, asking like this, while smiling, showing how sincerely she tries to please everyone. The crowd asks her to make a peace sign.
Emilina imitates it carefully with both hands, trying her best. A nearby nun sighs, clearly used to this situation.
From behind, the nun warns Emilina that if she keeps stopping and lingering, night will fall before they know it, gently scolding her for being distracted.
Emilina reacts in confusion, startled by something the nun says, asking what she means. Close-up of Emelina's serious expression as she calmly argues that fulfilling the wishes of the people is the duty of those ordained by the church, questioning whether that belief is wrong. The nun thinks to herself that she is acting strangely, while also reflecting that she's probably being spoiled too much by constant admiration. Emilina then speaks, mentioning that she heard someone named Yuri of Lysouth family once rescued a beastfolk girl from hooligans. The nun awkwardly reminds Emilina that, isn't she's done similar things before, like helping slaves who were illegally imprisoned, clearly implying this behavior isn't new.
Emilina steps forward angrily, objecting to the nun's implication. She insists that Yuri is still just a child, not even an adult, clearly defending him.
She then calms herself and speaks with conviction. Emilina says Yuri may be one of the prophesied figures, someone destined to receive God's oracle and strike down evil, like the saint, the hero, or the great sage. She praises him as strong and noble.
Then a close-up shows Emilina tightening her grip on her staff. She declares her decision loudly and decisively.
As the saintess, she announces that she has chosen Yuri to be her partner. She stands firm, gripping her staff, while the nun behind her reacts with exasperation at her recklessness.
A close-up of Emelina's face shows a confident, almost mischievous smile in her sparkling eyes. Yuri and Phi walk away after getting information.
The boy they spoke to thanks them politely, saying it's repayment for the meat skewers Yuri gave him earlier. The boy grins mischievously and hints that if Yuri gives him more meat, he might share even more information. His tone makes it clear he's enjoying the bargaining.
Yuri realizes what's going on and internally comments that the kid has become addicted to meat. The boy reacts in surprise when Yuri apologizes, saying he won't be able to give him any more meat starting tomorrow. The boy suddenly panics and grabs onto Yuri, desperately apologizing.
He blurts out that he'll do anything for more meat, even saying something extreme and gross. Yuri recoils and tells him to stop, clearly uncomfortable, while the boy tearfully asks if he did something wrong.
He drops to his knees and begs, explaining that everyone in his area is starving every day. His posture and tone make it clear he's not joking.
The boy starts explaining himself through tears. He says that most people like him have never eaten real meat before, showing how rare and precious it is to him. Phi looks at Yuri with concern and softly calls his name, sensing the emotional weight of the situation.
Yuri speaks firmly and coldly.
He says he's leaving the city tomorrow anyway, so what Phi is suggesting is impossible.
His expression shows resolve mixed with frustration. Phi reacts in shock, blurting out that Yuri is leaving the city.
She looks anxious and confused, clearly not expecting this sudden decision. The focus shifts to looming figures. Yuri thinks about how the saint is already searching for him, and how he has no idea what his father might be planning. Yuri explains his reasoning as they walk. He says he needs to return to his own domain as quickly as possible and doesn't have time to keep handing out meat to starving children. Yuri continues walking, stating plainly that he can't afford to keep helping everyone. The kneeling boy remains behind, emphasizing the harsh reality Yuri is trying to distance himself from.
The boy remains kneeling, shaking, and on the verge of tears.
He says there's no other way for him, emphasizing his desperation.
Yuri looks away in silence, conflicted. Phi gently asks him to be a little kind to the boy, clearly troubled by what she sees. He exhales heavily, rubbing the back of his neck.
It's clear he's stressed and struggling with the situation.
Yuri turns back and finally speaks.
He says he'll tell the boy about a good place to hunt, admitting it's not much, but it's something.
The boy's face lights up instantly, tears turning into joy.
Yuri tells him to gather all the other kids, giving them a chance. The boy runs off enthusiastically after being told to gather the others.
The boy happily calls back to Yuri as he leaves.
Fi watches him go and asks Yuri if making that promise while being in a hurry was really a good idea. Yuri thinks to himself that if he were to abandon the kids now, they might end up resenting him out of desperation, which would only cause more trouble.
He sighs, sounding resigned. Yuri and Fi then arrive at a wooded area outside the city. Yuri says they've reached their destination.
Behind Fi, several children have followed them, clinging close with hopeful expressions, showing they truly believed in Yuri's words. Yuri explains that this hidden spot is good for hunting and full of low-level monsters. Fi and the kids look surprised that such a place exists nearby.
Yuri points out a quiet clearing in the forest. Small, weak monsters are visible wandering around, showing this is a safe hunting area.
One of the kids says he didn't know a place like this existed.
Yuri tells the kids that for now, they should gather food here for tonight's dinner.
The children react with excitement and motivation. The kids excitedly chase small animals through the forest. In the background, Fi and Yuri watch them from a distance.
More kids shout that they've caught something too. Yuri comments calmly that they're doing well and getting some proper exercise. Fi is surprised but clearly impressed by how energetic everyone is.
Fi, now enthusiastic, asks Yuri if she's allowed to join in as well. Yuri agrees without hesitation, and Fi lights up with excitement, eager to take part in the hunt herself.
Fi happily runs through the forest, smiling brightly.
Yuri watching her with concern, saying that thanks to this, the orphans won't starve anymore.
Yuri thinks to himself nervously, wishing he could leave the city without ever running into Saint Emilina, clearly uneasy and stressed. Suddenly, Yuri turns around in alarm as the figure steps forward.
A calm, gentle voice speaks from the shadows, noting that quite a lot of people have gathered here.
Yuri suddenly senses something wrong.
His eyes widen in shock as he mutters a curse.
Saint Emilina peeks out from behind a tree, holding her staff. She casually asks if there's some kind of event going on, smiling innocently. Yuri immediately recognizes her and stiffens in shock. Yuri panics, backing away with a tense expression.
He wonders what she's even doing here, realizing the situation he feared most has finally happened. Emilina steps out of hiding, humming lightly as she walks closer, clearly relaxed and unconcerned.
Saint Emilina smiles brightly and confidently, addressing Yuri by name and confirming his identity. Her cheerful expression contrasts sharply with Yuri's dread. Yuri panics internally. He realizes Emilina has already spotted them and worries she might interfere with the group. He recognizes the situation is unfolding exactly like the game's scenario he fears.
Yuri notices her timing and movements match the original story script, making the situation even worse for him. Trying to stay calm, Yuri forces himself to play idiot, acting casually and pretending he doesn't know who is Yuri. Emilina suddenly reacts in surprise, wondering if she's mistaken about something she sensed. Her expression shifts from confident to startled.
Yuri then watches Emilina approach one of the kids, asking if his name is Yuri. He panics internally, realizing she's already interacting with them and fearing she's questioning the children until she gets to him again.
Yuri hesitates, then awkwardly admits he was just about to leave, clearly trying to disengage from the situation.
Emilina then asks what everyone is doing out here. Yuri, clearly uneasy, looks away instead of answering immediately.
He then sighs with resignation, accepting that he can't escape this encounter anymore, and explains himself, saying he only showed the kids a place to hunt.
Yuri explained their situation.
He says that orphans have a hard time surviving in the city, and adds that he did this so they wouldn't starve.
Now that they're hunting animals, they won't be hungry anymore. Emilina looks surprised and confused. Yuri turns away and speaks quickly. He says, essentially, that's it, I'm busy, so I'm taking my leave.
It's clear he's trying to escape the situation before it gets more complicated. Then in a sudden motion, Yuri's wrist is grabbed. Emilina grabs Yuri's wrist and beams with admiration, praising his actions as noble. Emilina misunderstands his reaction. She loudly praises him, saying not only Love South family's young master Yuri is here, but you who also have a kind-hearted soul, who is here to help those poor children in need.
Yuri panics and pulls away, saying he needs to leave. He clearly wants to escape before things spiral further.
Suddenly Fi called him, Master Yuri.
Fine excitedly lifts a huge rabbit over her head and proudly announces she caught it.
She calls out to Yuri to look, completely unaware of the tension. Yuri looks on in disbelief, frozen and confused by how fast things are going off track.
Emilina then asks, did she just call you Yuri? Yuri insists, this isn't true, and she never said anything like that. Emilina stands calmly with her staff, watching the scene unfold.
Yuri thinks internally, damn it, I doubt she'll believe my words.
Emilina smiles warmly with her hands together and says she probably misunderstood everything. Yuri thinks internally, thank God it's a good thing she is a bit stupid.
She then grips her staff, her expression now focused and serious. With explosive force, Emilina launches forward in a burst of power, moving far faster than expected.
Emilina suddenly appears right in front of Yuri, asking casually where he was going.
Yuri recoils in shock, completely caught off guard by her sudden presence.
A wide shot reveals the aftermath. The ground behind Yuri is torn up from the impact of Emilina's movement.
Yuri realizes in disbelief that she crossed that massive distance in a single burst, leaving destruction behind her.
He's stunned by just how absurdly fast and powerful she really is.
Emilina stands calmly in front of Yuri, holding her staff horizontally. Despite the ominous atmosphere, she politely asks if they can talk a bit.
Yuri internally panics, realizing again that she's an absolute monster.
A close-up of Yuri's eye shows pure panic as he desperately wonders what he's supposed to do next. Then suddenly, Emilina reacts to something behind her, turning with a surprise. A huge werewolf-like monster bursts out of the forest, roaring and lunging forward with a massive claw. The children in front freeze in shock, while Emilina and the others are visible in the distance behind them.
Emilina and Yuri react in alarm, wondering why such a monster is here and questioning whether it's the guardian of the forest, as the danger becomes undeniable. A close-up of Yuri's eye shows sudden realization. He understands something is seriously wrong.
Narration explains that only small monsters show up on this hunting ground. But when a high-ranking character appears, rare monster tends to emerge sometimes. Yuri looks tense and thinks that the monster was likely drawn here because Emilina's level is high, unintentionally attracting a powerful creature. As the monster advances, a child accidentally falls to the ground while running. The werewolf monster looms over a fallen child, drooling and raising its claw as the boy screams in terror, unable to move.
Emilina rushes forward, swinging her staff with determination.
She says no, as she steps in to stop the monster before it can strike the children.
Emilina rushes forward and shouts for the child to get away from the monster immediately.
The werewolf snarls and growls, clearly shift his focus on her. Emilina steps between the monster and the child, raising her staff and declaring herself as Saint Emilina, boldly announcing that she will be the one to fight it.
Fi softly calls Emilina's name with admiration, while Yuri remains tense, keeping his guard up as the battle is about to begin.
Yuri exhales in relief, thinking good, as he watches Emilina take control of the situation. Yuri panics and urgently tells Fi that they should run away while they still have the chance, shocking Fi in the process. From a distance, Emilina can be seen facing the monster alone, and Fi angrily points out that they'd be leaving her behind.
She looks conflicted and upset, clearly not agreeing with the idea of abandoning Emilina.
We see the werewolf snarls and lunges forward at Emilina. She narrows her eyes, fully focused, sensing the monster's movement and preparing herself. It explains that Saint Emilina is an extremely broken character, despite being a healer. Emilina swings her staff with overwhelming force, her cloak and hair whipping violently as the blow crashes down, emphasizing her sheer physical power.
A close-up of Emilina's calm, focused eyes reinforces that she's completely in control, unfazed by the power she's unleashing.
Yuri grabs Fi and tells her to get ready to leave. In the background, Emilina is already trading blows with the monster, sparks and impacts flying as she keeps it busy. Emilina swings her staff with extreme speed and precision, her face calm and focused as she unleashes another powerful attack. Emilina follows through with another crushing strike, the impact exploding with force, making it clear she is completely overpowering the monster. The werewolf's head is struck hard, blood splattering as the blow lands cleanly, showing how devastating her attacks are.
Emilina kneels beside the frightened boy and gently asks if he's okay. Behind them, the werewolf crashes into the ground, its body thrown back and defeated. The boy thanks Emilina for saving him, still shaken but unharmed. Emilina smiles warmly and says she's glad he wasn't injured, completely calm after the fight.
From a distance, Yuri and Fi watch while holding hands.
Yuri reassures Fi that Emilina is fine, while Fi remarks in amazement that Emilina really handled everything on her own. When Emilina is reassuring the boy that he is safe, suddenly, she noticed something. Emilina is suddenly struck from behind, blood spraying as she's hit mid-movement. In the distance, another werewolf charges forward, revealing the fight isn't over. Close-up of the new werewolf snarling, eyes sharp and focused, clearly ready to attack. Fi reacts in shock and panic, realizing there's another monster and that Emilina is now in danger again. A wide view shows the battlefield. One werewolf lies defeated on the ground, while a second one stands up ahead. Emilina realizes she dropped her guard. The boy panics when he sees Emilina kneeling and bleeding, shouting that she's injured.
Emilina stays calm and gently tells him not to worry. A close-up shows the wound on her side. The cut is deep, with blood soaking through her clothes, making it clear the injury is serious. A looming shadow and movement in the background hint at danger approaching again. The boy rushes to support her, grabbing her arm as she struggles to stay upright, trying to help despite the boy's fear. A massive werewolf looms directly in front of the boy and Emilina, towering over them with glowing eyes and drool dripping from its mouth, ready to strike. Another child reacts in sheer panic, eyes wide and body trembling, overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of the werewolf and Emilina's condition. Emilina clutches her wounded side, realizing how serious the situation is. She thinks that with the bleeding this severe, she won't be able to use healing magic in time. A close-up of the monster's face shows its glowing eyes and open mouth, completely focused on killing its prey. A little girl freezes in shock, barely able to process what's happening. One of the boys screams desperately for help, panic completely taking over as the attack becomes imminent. A black screen interrupts the chaos, announcing the activation of a hidden skill, assassination. In a single, explosive motion, Yuri flips through the air and slashes the werewolf's eyes with terrifying precision. The wounded werewolf lets out a violent roar, thrashing in agony. In front of it, Yuri lands calmly, head lowered, already moving past the monster as if the fight is over. A close-up reveals the killing blow. The blade has pierced cleanly through the monster's vital point, blood bursting outward as the assassination strike fully resolves. The werewolf staggers forward, roaring again, its massive body starting to lose balance as the fatal damage finally takes effect. Yuri looks at her seriously and remarks that the previous strike wasn't enough to completely finish the werewolf, and admits he hates asking this, but politely requests that she finish the monster for good. Emilina clenches her fist and answers firmly, agreeing to what's being asked despite her injury, her eyes sharp with resolve. Emilina activates her magic, light gathering around her as the words "Holy Magic Formation" appear. Emilina plants her feet and raises her staff high as a blinding holy light erupts in the shape of a massive cross. Calling out "Thousand Cross," she releases an overwhelming burst of sacred power. The holy attack tears through the air at extreme speed. The werewolf's body is shredded and blown apart piece by piece, shown only in fragments as it's completely overwhelmed by the light. The aftermath. Emilina stands firmly with her staff planted, still glowing faintly, having finished the spell. Behind her, Yuri and the rescued children stare in stunned silence. Her expression is calm and unreadable as the last traces of the holy attack fade, petals and debris drifting around her. She looks completely composed after unleashing this overwhelming power. Fi and the rescued children recoil and gape at the scene, still shaken by what they just witnessed. Yuri stares in shock, thinking to himself that he knew she was destructive, but this level of power went far beyond anything he imagined. Yuri concludes in stunned disbelief that Emilina isn't just strong, she's genuinely terrifying. The group then stands quietly in the forest. Emilina sincerely say, "Thanks to you, we were able to protect the children." Yuri looks uneasy but agrees, and turns slightly and says it's time for them to leave. Yuri calls out to Fi, urging her to come along. Just as they're about to go, a hand suddenly grabs Yuri's wrist firmly, stopping him mid-step. A voice interrupts, politely but urgently saying, "Please, wait." Emilina then smiles brightly and says, "It doesn't matter whether you're Yuri left south or not." Yuri freezes in shock, clearly not expecting that response. Emilina continues, saying that if he wants, she'll tell him directly what she's doing right now. She explains she's searching for people to form a group of heroes. Inside his head, Yuri thinks that if he actually gets recruited into her team, everything is going to be ruined for him, showing his fear of being dragged into something far bigger than he can handle. Yuri panics and yells for her to let go of him, physically trying to pull away as the situation spirals out of his control. Emilina freezes in place, eyes wide and blank with shock. Yuri's hand is accidentally pressed against her chest, and she clearly hasn't processed what just happened. Yuri pulls his hand back in horror, flustered and apologetic, letting out an awkward sound as he realizes where his hand was and how badly he messed up. Realization hits Emilina all at once. Her face turns bright red, sweat beads appear, and panic sets in as she finally understands the situation. Emilina explodes in embarrassment and anger, face bright red as she raises her staff defensively and shouts at Yuri, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. Yuri frantically waves his hands, panicking, and insists it was completely unintentional. Fi blurts out an awkward comment about men preferring big chests, clearly not helping the situation at all. Suddenly, Yuri thinks to himself that if Emilina ends up hating him now, there's no way he'll be able to join any kind of group. This mistake could actually solve everything. Emilina, still flustered and blushing, glares at Yuri and sharply asks whether it really was intentional or not, gripping her staff tightly. Yuri raises his hand and shouts that it was intentional. Emilina snaps back angrily, completely flustered, shouting that he's disgusting and immoral while pointing at him, her face burning red. Fi crosses her arms and bluntly calls Yuri a pervert. Still blushing hard, Emilina declares that it was a huge mistake to even try inviting him in the first place. Emilina, blushing and flustered, yells that she shouldn't have bothered with him, and should have just go and invite Yuri Lovesouth at his house. Yuri tries to speak up and stop things, nervously raising his hand. He freezes in horror. A dark imagined scenario flashes in Yuri's mind. If rumors spread that a noble from the prestigious Lovesouth family touched a saint's chest, it would be a massive scandal, and he would be in big trouble. Emilina suddenly turns away with determination, declaring she's made up her mind. She's going to the Lovesouth manor to personally invite him. It makes Yuri panic internally. A few hours later, a large noble manor is shown. Yuri urgently tells Fi to hurry before the saint realizes his true identity. The manor's large gates slowly open. A carriage with a rider leave the manor at full speed. The dramatic motion lines emphasize its urgency. Yuri and Fi sit inside the carriage, both looking tired. Yuri says they somehow managed to get through the situation, while she worries about the children they left behind and hopes they'll be okay. His expression shifts from casual to tense. He mutters, "Who knows?" In his thoughts, Yuri recalls the orphan boy smiling proudly. He realizes he's seen those kids somewhere before in the game's story, and reflects calmly, thinking he doesn't need to worry. Those people probably weren't connected to the main plot anyways. A dramatic scene from the game is shown, orphans rioting through the streets. It explains that in the game, a catastrophic future event called the Great Orphan Revolt was supposed to happen in a few years, but thanks to Yuri, it won't be happening anymore. Back in the present, Yuri sits hunched forward on a bench, stressed. He admits that for now, his own situation and future worried him much more. He reflects that while he succeeded in preventing the event, the relief feels hollow because the outcome wasn't entirely a good thing, and uncertainty still hangs over what comes next. And even though he managed to avoid disaster this time, there's no guarantee things are completely safe yet. Fi then comments that he's brooding again, noticing Yuri's gloomy mood. Yuri declares with determination that he will escape his doomed fate. He believes he has already shattered all the death flags that once led to his ruin. He calmly tells Fi that everything is fine and that it's time for them to commit fully to this new path. The wagon rolls forward at full speed across an open road. Yuri then says they're heading toward lands he's never seen before, symbolizing a new unknown future. The scene shifts to a wide view of the road ahead. Fi excitedly says, "We're finally heading to your land," showing her full enthusiasm. Suddenly, she noticed something. Inside the wagon, Fi looks toward Yuri and asks what he's doing, noticing his strange behavior. Yuri then reacts with a brief "oh." He opens the food storage and explains he's using magic to keep the food from spoiling by refrigerating it. Yuri explains he's trying to combine wind magic with water magic to make ice, but it's not working as well as he hoped. Fi thinks to herself that Yuri is completely absorbed in talking about magic and not paying attention to anything else. Fi tells him she also wants to practice something, sounding eager and curious. Yuri then prepares something, saying "let's see," as he focuses and raises his hand. Yuri creates a knife using earth magic. The blade forms in midair while spinning, showing his controlled magic. Fi reacts with interest as Yuri suggests using these knives. He explains it'll be good practice for her throwing skills and even suggests using them for hunting. Fi happily thanks Yuri, clearly excited to receive something to practice. Fi enthusiastically raises a knife and declares she'll do her best and hunt lots of prey, with full confidence and motivation. Yuri then wishes her good luck. Fi is shown mid-throw, eyes squeezed shut and body twisting with effort, putting all her strength into the motion. The wagon moves forward as Fina throws a knife from inside. The blade flies past the wagon and animals with a sharp whoosh, showing she's practicing while traveling. Yuri calmly does his work while Fi trying her best to hunt. The thrown knife lands solidly in the ground with a thunk. Multiple knives slice through the air one after another, emphasizing repeated practice throws. Fi looks completely dejected, tears welling up as she admits she couldn't land a single hit. Her mood is gloomy after repeated failures. Yuri reflects that throwing knives from a moving carriage is harder than expected, explaining why she struggled. He then notes that he did manage to make ice successfully, but realizes he still needs a better method to keep their food properly refrigerated. Suddenly, Fi jumps up in alarm, while Yuri calmly turns his attention toward the sudden disturbance. Suddenly, she reacts in shock and shouts that she heard a scream coming from outside the wagon. Both of them lean toward the opening to check what's going on, trying to see where the sound came from. From the wagon's perspective, a group of armed men can be seen surrounding civilians in the road ahead, confirming the danger. Fi looks toward the scene in shock, realizing the situation is serious. Fi bursts in shouting bad news, and urgently reports that people are being attacked nearby. A bandit looms over the frightened girl, grabbing her and coldly commenting on her appearance. The father desperately tries to protect his daughter, yelling at the attackers to stop as several bandits hold him. The daughter is knocked down and restrained while the father is held. The leader's face is shown in close-up, grinning greedily as he remarks that their targets look filthy rich. Then the bandit leader gives brutal orders: kill anyone who gets in the way and steal everything of value. He laughs loudly, clearly enjoying the chaos and violence around them. From the wagon, Fi reacts with disgust, quietly saying how awful the situation is.
Yuri looks on calmly and realistically, noting that any money they can get their hands on would be useful.
Yuri adds that since he plans to develop his land, funding will be necessary, framing the situation in practical terms.
Yuri calmly states their plan: they'll save the people being attacked and take anything valuable from the bandits. Fi is shocked and yells that Yuri's goal sounds the same as the bad guys. Yuri then calls out to Fi
and says they're heading straight toward them. The bandits shout violent orders, kill the men and capture the women alive, showing exactly how dangerous and cruel they are.
Someone then say, "I see that you're having a field day doing bad deeds." The bandits look around, irritated and suspicious, trying to figure out who just spoke.
They spot Yuri sitting calmly on top of the wagon, with Fi below him. The bandits react in shock, clearly not expecting someone, especially a kid, to suddenly intervene so boldly. Yuri casually tells them to cool off and calm down, treating the violent situation far more lightly. Close-up of Yuri's calm face as he simply says, "With this." A sharp ice projectile streaks forward at high speed. Yuri raises his arm from atop the wagon and activates a spell. Text announces the technique as a combination of water magic and wind magic, forming an ice meteor, as chunks of ice begin forming and launching downward. A wide overhead view shows the aftermath. Several bandits are already knocked out and scattered across the ground, while the wagon and horses remain unharmed. He wonders to himself whether the quick victory was because he leveled up from his recent magic training, or if the bandits were simply weaker than expected. One of the rescued villagers stares in disbelief, clearly stunned by how fast the situation has changed. The bandit leader stands alone, stunned. He realizes all of his subordinates were wiped out in a single attack and can't believe what just happened. The leader thinks to himself that if things keep going this way, he's going to be next. One of the rescued girl looks on nervously as the bandit leader snaps his head around, clearly reaching a breakthrough. Yuri turns his head slightly as the bandit leader angrily shouts at him. The bandit leader grabs the girl by the hair and presses a sword to her neck, screaming that he'll kill her if Yuri makes a single move.
Yuri's expression remains flat and calculating.
From a distance, Yuri calmly responds, asking if the threat is really meant for him, showing no panic or urgency. Yuri then say, he is saying the threat to wrong person. The bandit leader snaps back in anger, shouting in disbelief as he doesn't understand his words. The sword is shown flying past at high speed, and it pierces straight through the bandit leader's raised arm. He screams in pain, as the attack lands cleanly and instantly disables him. The bandit leader staggers backward, clutching his arm, and the girl runs away from the bandit, escaping the immediate danger. Fi leans out from the wagon, eyes wide with joy and disbelief, as she proudly declares that she finally did it. Fi throws her arms up in excitement, sparkling with joy as she proudly shouts that she did it. Yuri calmly notes that Fi had been aiming at him for a while, implying this hit wasn't luck. Yuri explains the reason for her earlier misses. She can aim well as long as she isn't throwing knives from a moving carriage. Fi stands proudly with her eyes closed. Yuri then calmly praises her with a simple "well done." He then prepares another spell, combining water magic and wind magic, and calmly declares that he'll handle the rest himself. The wounded bandit panics, screaming for them to stop and to stay away, realizing he's completely outmatched. Yuri lunges forward and swings a magically formed blade in a wide arc. Ice and wind spiral together around his weapon as he slashes the bandit leader. Yuri stands with his back turned, holding ice-formed blades as cold mist and frost swirl around him. The ground rumbles, showing the aftermath of his attack. The woman looks toward Yuri with wide eyes, still processing what just happened. The rescued man bows deeply, clearly shaken but relieved. He tells Yuri that words can't express how grateful he is. The man continues thanking him sincerely, clasping his hands together in respect, while the rescued woman stands close by. Yuri notices the wagon and the sign. A close-up of the wagon's sign reveals their affiliation, the Muller Company. It confirms they're an established merchant group. He reflects that merchants are extremely valuable to him since he plans to develop his land, and adds, he wants to build amicable relations with them as much as possible. He reassures them that they're safe now and casually asks whether bandits often appear in this area. The merchant reacts in surprise, admitting he completely forgot about that. The merchant explains that in this area, people constantly warn each other to beware of both bandits and the Love-South family. His expression shows fear and frustration, making it clear this reputation is widespread. Yuri reacts in surprise when he hears the name Love-South family. He goes on to explain that the Love-South family has a complete monopoly on the capital's market and abuses that power however they like. The merchant's emotions boil over as he shouts that the people connected to that house are nothing but scum, emphasizing how hated they are. Yuri listens in silence, clearly taken aback. Sweat forms on his face as he absorbs the information.
Fi walks up, annoyed, telling Yuri he's late. Fi complains loudly that Yuri took too long to praise her, clearly wanting recognition sooner. Yuri awkwardly praises Fi for doing well, casually pats Fi on the head. Suddenly the merchant reacts with an "oh," as he remembers something. The merchant suddenly realizes something important and asks Yuri for his name, saying he forgot to ask the name of the person who saved his life. Yuri freezes in surprise. Yuri hesitates, sweating and stumbling over his words, unsure how to respond. Suddenly Fi scolds Yuri, telling him he needs to properly say his name when people ask, making Yuri panic. Before Yuri can stop her, Fi jumps in enthusiastically and proudly introduces him as Yuri Lovesouth, praising him as an incredible person. Yuri looks panicked, knowing this is bad. The merchants react in shock as soon as they hear Yuri and realize the family name. Close-up of Yuri touching his face in frustration, thinking to himself that this situation couldn't have gone worse. The merchants immediately prostrate themselves on the ground, groveling before Yuri. Yuri stands there awkwardly while Fi looks confused. Yuri internally laments that he wanted to build friendly relations with them, but now, because of his name, everything gone to drain. In a grand mansion, someone inside notes that Yuri has already departed, implying his journey has begun without delay. With a calculating expression, Balin Lovesouth reflects on Yuri's actions, finding it odd, as he chosen a beastfolk as his servant, without buying a slave. A worried-looking man admits he had no idea that Master Yuri is into beastkin, clearly surprised by what he's learned. A wineglass is raised as Balin Lovesouth remarks that this revelation is a surprise. Balin Lovesouth studies his reflection in a wineglass, eyes narrowed. He wonders if Yuri may have already seen through his schemes. Another man responds calmly, saying Yuri is probably being given too much credit and likely hasn't thought that far ahead. Balin Lovesouth recalls that his original plan was to keep Yuri alive only long enough to see whether he could be useful, but he admits to himself that things would be different if Yuri intended to undermine him directly. Just to be on safe side, Balin Lovesouth order him to set the monster on Yuri when he reaches his land. A vast view of Yuri's territory is shown from afar. Several large wolf-like monsters watch the land from a ridge, their silhouettes dark and threatening. Instead of sparing Yuri, Balin Lovesouth intend for monsters to massacre everyone in his land. The merchant and his daughter suddenly drop to the ground and bow deeply, slamming their heads down in full prostration. Yuri watches them with a shocked, uneasy expression, realizing they're literally groveling before him. From a distance, Yuri gestures calmly and tells them they don't need to apologize anymore. His tone contrasts with their extreme reaction, emphasizing how uncomfortable and awkward the situation has become for him. Yuri thinks to himself that this probably isn't something they're doing because of his father's orders. Instead, they're terrified because they've realized he's from the Lovesouth family, whose reputation scares them. Yuri thinks to himself that he wants to build relationships that are mutually beneficial. He notes that merchants who have no ties to his family should be the easiest to work with. Then the merchants say, "I Alan Muller," bows deeply again and formally apologize. He admits that while he spoke disrespectfully of the Lovesouth family, Yuri still saved them, and he's grateful. Yuri awkwardly explains that although he is a member of the Lovesouth family, he's basically been cast aside by them. Yuri then asks plainly who they really think he is, still confused by how extreme their reactions are. Then the merchant places his hand on his daughter, Arsha, believing his entire family line will not be wiped out, showing just how terrified they were of the Lovesouth name. Yuri looks relieved and thinks to himself that thank goodness, this at least clears up some of the misunderstanding and tension. The merchant, still kneeling, asks what brought Yuri here, calling him Master Yuri. Arsha kneeling behind him, watching quietly. Yuri casually explains that he was on his way to the land his father gave him as a farewell gift. The merchant freezes for a moment as the meaning of Yuri's words starts to sink in. The merchant, Alan Muller, and Arsha immediately throw themselves into deep bows again, praising Yuri's generosity and calling him my lord. Yuri panics and yells at them to stop, clearly overwhelmed by how far this has gone. The wagon starts moving again, showing that despite the chaos and misunderstandings, the group finally resumes their journey forward. Back at the wagon, Yuri climbs up and grabs a sack while the merchant nervously confirms that Yuri is really heading to his own land. Yuri calmly reassures him that yes, that's correct, and tells him not to worry. Close up on Yuri's face as he say, helping each other is natural, he wants friendly relations. At the same time, Yuri thinks to himself, he hopes to build useful connections, who is not ties to the Lovesouth family. At the same time, the merchant senses something off as Yuri's smile feels calculated. At that moment, someone calls out for help while Yuri is talking with him. The bandits is yanked violently into the air by a rope, screaming. One shouts for mercy, another cries that he's going to die, as the wagon continues to drag them to the town. The merchant pulls aside the curtain, as the people outside are continue screaming in pain,
shouting for them to slow down. Yuri lifts the heavy box with ease and casually remarks that there's still a lot to improve. Close-up of the merchant's uneasy face as he watches Yuri handling a large crate, his eyes show suspicion. Then the merchant approaches Yuri and asks what he's been working on. Yuri opens the box to reveal neatly stored food inside. He explains that it might look unimpressive at first, but this device is called a refrigerator, and it's used to cool food and preserve it longer. Alan reacts in shock, repeating that it can cool and preserve food. He then asks, wouldn't such tool require a huge expenditure of mana to work? Yuri calmly corrects Alan, pointing out that he's mistaken. Yuri then explains with a simple diagram how the refrigerator works. Wind magic compresses and circulates air, water magic creates a refrigerant-like substance, and heat is drawn away, producing cold air inside while releasing heat outside. Alan reacts in disbelief, clearly shocked that such an advanced tool can even exist. Yuri admits there is a drawback. The refrigerator needs a constant supply of mana to keep running. Alan hesitates and says he doesn't think it's necessary. He suggests that by using those magic stones, the refrigerator could automatically cool food without constant manual mana input. Yuri explains that magic stones obtained from monsters naturally contain wind and water magic effects. Alan clenches his fist in excitement and declares that if this can be mass-produced, it could become a huge business opportunity. Yuri quietly reflects, watching Alan's reaction and thinking things through. Yuri realizes something important. He admits he had no idea that magic stones, something he only saw as items to sell, actually had such practical utility. The panel explains their value by size: small stones equal copper, medium ones silver, and large ones gold. Alan rushes toward Yuri, shouting his name, unable to contain his enthusiasm. He becomes extremely excited. Alan insists strongly and begs Yuri not to sell this refrigerator invention to anyone else. He wants exclusive rights to sell it through his company. Yuri calmly says he'll think it over. Alan then responds positively, smiling and saying great. Yuri, thinking to himself, he recognizes that Alan is sharp-minded and clearly a capable merchant. Arsha apologizes awkwardly for the trouble caused earlier, blaming her father. Fi brushes it off, saying it's no big deal. The wagon comes to a stop. Yuri knocks on the door and says calmly that they've arrived. A caption introduces the location, the local city, Searsbark. As they enter the city streets, Yuri explains their first objective: turning in the captured bandits and collecting the reward. Boots step sharply onto the stone pavement, the sound sudden and tense, signaling someone approaching fast. Several armored guards rush in and surround Yuri's group, swords drawn. One of them shouts for them not to move, clearly treating the situation as a threat. Yuri freezes in surprise, the beastkin girl gasps, and Alan panics behind them. None of them understand what's happening yet as the guards close in aggressively. More guards advance from the street, accusing Alan of being a malicious merchant who attacked travelers. They confidently identify him as the culprit. A stern city guard steps forward, gripping his spear. He calls out Alan Muller by name and declares that he is under arrest. Alan panics and protests loudly, insisting that he was the one attacked instead and that there must be some kind of mistake. The guard shouts that there are witnesses who reported the crime. His face twists with anger as he accuses Alan of assaulting innocent people, making it clear the situation has turned serious. Alan, drenched in sweat, panics and blurts out that this can't be happening, clearly shaken by the accusation. Yuri looks sharply to the side, sensing something is wrong as the situation escalates. The bandit smirks and claims that Yuri's group attacked them first and that they only defended themselves. The bandit insists loudly that what he's saying is the truth. Yuri glances back toward the bandit, suspicious, wondering what he's trying to pull, and angrily blames everything on Alan, saying it's his fault for refusing the Viscount's offer. Alan panics when he realizes the reason for everything that is happening, his hands raised in desperation. Yuri turns to him sharply and demands an explanation, clearly expecting the truth. Alan hesitates and admits that the Viscount told him something important, his voice shaking as he recalls it. Alan confesses that the Viscount promised to make him a personal merchant if he handed over his daughter, Arsha, to sleep with him. Arsha stands in silence, her face shadowed, tears well in her eyes as she clenches her fist, showing shock, shame, and deep emotional pain. Alan then speaks, saying he never expected the situation to turn into such a trap. Behind Yuri, Fi looks shaken, while Alan crouches, overwhelmed. Yuri calls the Viscount a despicable man. One of the captured men reacts and mutters as the tension rises around him, and suddenly grins and reveals the truth. The one who hired them to attack was Lord Jesloff himself. The bandit explains the scheme: if Alan fought back, he'd be treated as a criminal, but if he didn't, he'd be ruined anyway. The bandit declares that Alan is finished no matter what he chose to do. Alan breaks down further, muttering that this can't be happening, his despair fully setting in. Yuri calmly pieces everything together.
He realizes this was all part of their plan and says that, at this point, they're completely cornered. Yuri thinks back to the moment they entered the city.
He recalls sensing something strange when such a large number of soldiers appeared so quickly. Alan clutches Arsha tightly, shaking as Yuri realizes the entire situation was a carefully planned scheme from the start, meant to trap them. Suddenly, a heavy boots approach. A voice declares that they've finally succeeded in capturing Muller.
The Viscount Jesloff appears in person, furious. He shouts that he finally captured the scum who would dare harm my innocent townspeople and travelers. Yuri then realizes, so this is Viscount Jesloff.
From above, Jesloff confronts the scene directly, calling out to the captain of the guard.
He declares that he will now declares their fate. Viscount Jesloff explodes in rage and declares that the main culprit, Alan Muller, will be executed on the spot. Alan panics as the order is given clearly, tie him up immediately and cut off his head. Guards begin restraining Alan.
Jesloff coldly dismisses the situation.
Yuri thinks Jesloff can invent whatever crimes he wants since it's his own territory. The Viscount turns his attention toward Arsha, naming her as an accomplice.
His expression dark and calculating.
A close-up of Arsha's body emphasizes the intentions of Viscount disturbingly clear. Viscount Jesloff grins grotesquely and announces that he will personally handle Arsha's punishment. She looks humiliated and terrified, unable to resist.
Viscount Jesloff reaches toward Arsha and orders her to come to him.
She recoils, stammering no, clearly terrified. A gloved arm suddenly moves in front of Arsha, stopping her from being taken.
Her eyes widen in shock as she realizes someone stepped in.
Yuri positions himself protectively in front of Arsha, extending his arm to block Jesloff.
Calm but firm, he tells Jesloff that this has gone far enough. A close-up of Arsha shows her calling out Master Yuri, her eyes wide with fear and concern for him. Then Viscount Jesloff furiously shouts at Yuri,
threatening to have him executed as well and demanding to know if Yuri understands who he's opposing. Yuri reacts calmly internally, this crazy Viscount is seriously thinking of executing him.
Jesloff explodes in rage, screaming that challenging someone of higher rank in this city is a grave offense.
Stepping forward aggressively, Jesloff declares that he will personally teach Yuri a lesson, asserting his authority as the confrontation escalates.
Yuri stays outwardly calm, thinking that Jesloff is using his status as an excuse to justify every nonsense that comes to his head.
Suddenly, Yuri thinks about status, and started to smile internally.
Yuri turns his back slightly and speaks coolly, directly addressing Viscount Jesloff, questioning whether he truly believes he can have him executed.
Jesloff roars in anger, shouting what, as Yuri's attitude clearly provokes him.
Jesloff states that killing a worthless child like him would be nothing more than a childish game. A hand grabs Yuri by the collar.
Jesloff grabs Yuri and declares himself Viscount Jesloff, boasting that he holds absolute authority here.
Jesloff shouts orders, yelling at the guards to immediately seize Yuri, clearly losing his composure as the situation slips out of his control.
The guards step forward with weapons ready, responding to Jesloff's command and surrounding Yuri.
Yuri addresses Jesloff directly, emphasizing in this city, making it clear he understands the political rules. He then calmly turns to face the soldiers and asks a sharp question, whether a mere Viscount truly has the power to order the execution of a member of a ducal family. Jesloff looks confused and irritated, responding with a baffled huh, as Yuri's confidence unsettles him. Yuri stands calmly in front of the guards and says he forgot to properly introduce himself. A heavy pause fills the scene as Yuri's name is about to be revealed.
With an intense close-up on his eye, Yuri finally declares his identity, Yuri Lufself.
Then Jesloff speaks arrogantly, recalling that he once had an audience in the royal capital.
And he doesn't remember ever meeting him there.
Suddenly he remembers something in royal capital.
Jesloff suddenly panics, shouting that he's seen Yuri's face before. His expression twists into shock as the realization hits him. Jesloff's face contorts in fear as he fully remembers who Yuri is.
He mentally screams that this boy is undeniably the heir of the Lufself family and realizes too late that he has crossed someone far beyond his reach. Yuri stands calmly, amid a dark heavy atmosphere, and Jesloff confirms it plainly, he is the son of Lord Lufself.
Yuri then asks Jesloff, it seems he finally understands.
Yuri finishes his point with a quiet smile, stating that Jesloff has crossed someone of a higher rank than himself, making it clear that Jesloff's authority means nothing here. Jesloff completely loses his composure, screaming in terror, sweat pours down his face as panic takes over. From a wider view, Yuri slowly walks to Jesloff, adding that there's more to the situation now.
Yuri continues calmly, explaining that Jesloff also tried to trap two merchants under Yuri's protection by fabricating crimes and ordering their execution. Jesloff has already collapsed on the ground.
Yuri also lists Jesloff as another crime, by trying to force himself on Arsha for a night and framing her afterward.
Arsha stands behind Yuri, shaken and scared. Yuri directly addresses him. "Tell me, Viscount Jesslov," signaling that judgment is about to be passed and that there's no escape left. Yuri stands over Jesslov, framed against a dark background, and coldly asks what Jesslov thinks Yuri's father would say if he learned about these despicable acts. Jestlov's face looms behind, already tense and shaken. He completely breaks down, crying and trembling in terror. The realization hits him that his crimes could reach someone far more powerful than himself, and that his position can no longer protect him. Jesslov throws himself face-first onto the ground, bowing deeply and shouting that he offers his most sincere apologies. His posture is completely submissive and desperate. Still pressed to the floor, he begs for forgiveness, claiming he didn't know Yuri was an heir of the Lufsouth house and apologizing for his grave lack of respect. The captain of the guard looks distressed as Jesslov pleads for the incident to be kept secret from Yuri's father, begging for mercy. From above, Jesslov remains collapsed on the ground while Yuri stands calmly. Jesslov internally panics, thinking that provoking the Lufsouth family may have been a fatal mistake. Yuri calmly reveals the truth: he was rejected by his own family, which is why he couldn't report anything to his father in the first place, and thinks it doesn't matter anymore, as he no longer has his house's power. Unaware, at the same time, Jesslov, crying and panicking, begs Yuri not to tell his father. Suddenly Jesslov hurriedly says he understands, nodding frantically as if trying to grasp at any remaining hope. Jesslov hastily claims that what happened with the Muller company was an unreasonable decision on his part, desperately attempting to rewrite the narrative, and suddenly shouts orders to the guards, telling them to throw the bandits into prison, trying to regain control of the situation. The bandit, tied up and terrified, says this can't be happening, realizing they're being punished despite following orders. Then the bandit are being dragged away by guards. One of them insists they only did what Lord Jesslov ordered them to do. A wide shot of the town rooftops, as they reflects that this punishment is more than cruel. As night falls over the city under a full moon, signaling the time passing, Yuri stands calmly, holding a small bag, thinking that this should settle everything. Behind him, Jesslov panics and tries to offer more money and begging him not to tell his father about what happened. Arsha calls out to Yuri, clearly relieved and emotional now that the danger is over. Yuri calmly acknowledges Arsha by name. He turns to her, reassuring her that everything is fine now. She looks confused and quietly reacts to his words. Yuri smiles slightly and says he made sure Jesslov won't be able to use his authority for malicious purposes anymore, showing that he handled the situation decisively. Yuri reassures Arsha, telling her that with what he's done, Jesslov will never dare trouble her again. Arsha listens quietly, still processing everything. A close-up of Arsha's eyes shows her emotions welling up. Arsha bows deeply, nervously thanking Yuri for his help. She struggles to find the right words, showing her sincerity and humility. She continues expressing her gratitude, emphasizing how precious his help was to her. Alan insists on thanking Yuri properly, clearly moved. He then insists saying, "You save our lives not once but twice." But Yuri calmly tells them not to dwell on it. Then Alan steps forward, saying Yuri mentioned something important earlier and he wants to confirm it. Yuri looks confused, wondering what he said that caused such a reaction. Alan recalls Yuri's words, that he tried to trap two merchants who were supposedly under his protection, accusing them with false crimes and planning their execution. Alan repeats Yuri's words back to him with intensity, emphasizing their meaning. Alan grabs Yuri's hand tightly, overwhelmed. He says it's a great honor and that he never imagined Yuri would approve of him as a merchant under his patronage. Alan straightens up, raising his hand with determination. He loudly vows that he will do everything in his power to serve Yuri faithfully. Yuri looks a bit embarrassed but smiles softly. He thanks Alan and says he's glad to have him. Alan turns serious and calls out to Yuri formally, clearly building up to something important. Alan suddenly asks Yuri if he has a fiancée. Yuri, caught off guard, reply with, "Of course not." Suddenly, Arsha is pulled forward as Alan insists that Yuri should take his daughter's hand in marriage. She's completely flustered, blushing hard and panicking at the sudden proposal. Yuri scratches his head awkwardly and mutters that Arsha should be more assertive, clearly uncomfortable with where this is going. But suddenly Arsha agrees. Arsha blushes deeply, eyes sparkling. She admits she's inexperienced, but thanks Yuri in advance for taking care of her, clearly taking the proposal very seriously and emotionally. Yuri questions her enthusiasm, asking why she's so eager about her father's proposal. As Arsha and her father repeatedly calls Master Yuri, while Yuri panics and tells them to keep their distance from him.